Yeah, let me go back. I'll just briefly.
Yeah, so we have, yeah.
Okay. But yeah, sorry, we actually didn't have audio for the first part of this, but so we're going to be talking about Flex-MoE, just kind of doing this multimodal combination analysis using this mixture of experts adaptation. So mixture of experts commonly build on top of the transformer architecture due to its success and scalability. And so we're going to be kind of thinking about this in terms of a traditional transformer architecture using transformer encoders and the multi-head attention and self-attention mechanisms. So getting into some of the vocab around mixture of experts. So basically a router is like a component that decides which expert or kind of like sub-network is going to specialize in specific inputs. So basically this router or gate function is a set of weights that are learned during training that's trying to map X to some kind of an importance weight over these set of experts. And so you can kind of decide how many experts you'll have in your architecture. So basically what this model is doing is it's learning which experts are best fit for these specific inputs, deciding which expert has the biggest impact on the overall score of an input. So for example, if let's say we're operating on an image data set, we might have the one expert that specializes in like landscapes. Maybe we'll have one that specializes in identifying animals or something like that. But it just kind of depends on what your input space is. And so what is an expert? So an expert is basically, like I said, a subset of the original network that's independently parameterized. So that means that each one of these experts is like a feed-forward neural network that has its own weights that aren't shared with the other experts or networks. And so each input is processed by this gate network or gate function. It's basically just a matrix of weights that are learned to efficiently map each input to a specific expert. So for example here, this is how it works. So here we have two inputs, the blue and the orange. So the model is receiving the, let's say when it receives the blue input, it uses this gate network to basically just decide which expert it's gonna send it to. So it's just matrix multiplication here, so we get the output 3 and 4. And then we take the maximum of those two values and see for the blue input, we decide to send to expert number 2. And then from there, we process the input through expert number 2. And then we take the ReLU activation function of those outputs, and that's what we use as the output for the next steps. But yeah, so typically, like in a mixture of experts model, you'll have several experts. You decide how many experts you want to have. And so each expert has its own output. But at the end, we need to combine these somehow. So this is oftentimes referred to as a combination function. So typical combination functions are like summed, weighted sums, or averaging, or concatenation. So it just kind of depends on how you want to set up your model. I don't think we're necessarily concerned with combination functions because we'll see later on.
So it's not a single expert, but multiple experts are running?
There are multiple experts. I can't remember if it does top K or if it just uses the top one expert. Well, I'll need to.
Yeah, if it's top one, you don't have an issue of combining.
Yeah.
You always just choose the appropriate one.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, and so recently people have been looking at this sparse mixture of experts because basically there's really not always a need to use every expert. So just depending on what input is provided to your model, again, like certain tokens are going to be routed to specific experts that will learn how to basically specialize depending on the input. So for example, let's say we have this duck image. We might have one expert that specializes in water. We might have another that specializes in like shadows or like beak features or like any other kind of maybe animal-like feature, something like that. So when it comes into the model, the gating function is going to assign the most relevant expert. As you can see here, maybe like E2, the expert 2 is like the expert for the duck's head or something like that. And then maybe for the water background, the gate assigns the input token to expert number 1. So then for a given token, there's going to be probabilities of which experts are most likely the best fit. So top K or sparse mixture of experts only turns on the top K experts that you want to use. So it's pretty good. It kind of makes the computation obviously more efficient with trade-offs and accuracy and things like that. So this is just kind of a background, I guess, of like how mixture of experts has evolved in recent literature. So in 1991, we had the local experts being used for vowel classification, and then we got into top K routing, which is basically these sparsely activated experts. But then kind of like what Sergey was touching on with the top one experts, we have this thing called the switch transformer, which basically just takes the top expert and only routes it there, which makes everything a lot more simple and more efficient. And recently we have these concepts like dropless MOE and soft MOEs, which basically try to address some common issues with mixture of experts, which are like token dropping. So like if a certain expert is really busy, it might drop incoming tokens and result in some issues there. But then also like certain experts get like over specialized if they're already getting a lot of tokens. So these new architectures are trying to address some stuff like that. But yeah, does anybody have any questions so far?
A little bit new to machine learning and specifically architectures like this. So forgive me if some of the nomenclature is wrong, but what distinguishes this from your typical like deep learning structure where you have these hidden layers or these nodes? Because it sounds very, very similar.
So I guess it just kind of depends on your implementation of the MOE, but like for example, like a typical feed-forward network is not really like a transformer because it doesn't necessarily have an encoder and a decoder. So MOEs that are built on top of transformers have that encoder and decoder structure as well as like this positional embedding step and like attention mechanisms, but you can design the MOE however you want. It just needs to have, I guess, these experts that are trained to specialize in certain inputs. Yeah, do you have anything to add to?
You could do it only with feed-forward networks. The big thing is like how you're sort of building an architecture where maybe you have some encoding or whatever with some feed-forward network, but then you route it to unconnected or separate subnetworks which deal with particular concepts hopefully or feature types. The routing is going to be ballistic based on whatever task you do, but that's the main idea. It could be but transformers which they're built on are fundamentally different from they're feed-forward networks at the core, but they have some different architectural stuff.
Okay, so as beforehand, you would have like one network handling this task. Now you're breaking it down to these sub networks that can break it up even more. Okay.
Yeah. That's my understanding. So yeah, any other questions? Does anyone know? Does it make sense? I'm trying to remember. Okay.
I have a question, if I may. Sorry. Is there any solution, maybe you're going to go into this, about the overfitting with the experts? Because it does seem conceptually similar to other problems.
So yeah, that's what I think they're trying to kind of address with like this dropless MOE and soft MOEs and stuff like that. So if you're interested, definitely look into those.
Okay.
But there are, I guess, some prevalent issues with mixture of experts such as yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Yeah, so getting into like the use case for this kind of model for things that we work with here. So Alzheimer's disorder, as we learned from Armina's presentation, like trying to understand the causes and treatments for Alzheimer's disorder obviously like involves so many different kinds of like modalities and hypotheses surrounding that. So for example, like modalities might be missing for certain patients. Obviously, like not every patient who goes to the hospital with Alzheimer's related symptoms and treatment are going to get their genetic data taken and loaded into a database, or necessarily get a brain scan or other things like that. So there is a lot of different kind of overlaps and things with the data that's been collected from people with Alzheimer's disorder. But we ultimately just want to understand the progression of this disease and how to effectively treat it and potential causes. So, but most models, they understand this, but they are expecting all of the modalities to be present, and they're not really considering overlap between modalities that are missing and present. And so this paper is kind of hypothesizing, and there's like a growing thought that different modalities have offer different forms of information, even when they're combined, offer unique information as well. So basically, like we're familiar with what clinical data is. It's basically like tabular data containing demographics about a subject, such as like their age, sex, and any kind of test scores that they may have in vitals. And biospecimen is just some kind of like quantified data about any kind of tissue samples and stuff like that from a subject. And genetic data is like DNA sequencing and stuff like that. And then we have image data, which of course is like MRI, CT scans, and things like that. So we want to think about how to effectively combine these, and also reason about what are the advantages of unique combinations of each modality. So this is a figure from the paper. So they're just kind of highlighting the missing modality problem that I've kind of been explaining here. So this is a depiction of the ADNI data set. And here you can see there are 4 different modalities in this data set. And most models are only considering all of the overlapping modalities, as you can see in the central image. But what they don't really think about is, you know, the different unique combinations of modalities. So as you can see, there's an imbalance of which modalities are present for each patient, exhibiting unique combinations of these modalities. So this model that I'm going to discuss is aiming to best leverage these unique combinations of modalities. You know, whereas most of them are kind of requiring like the central case modality. So this is just kind of an overview of what this paper is doing in terms of the methods. So in the top corner, and I'm going to go over each one of these in detail in the next slides, but so A is just kind of giving a highlight of their architecture. So it takes input from each subject, which uses which obviously has like a unique combination of modalities, and it just uses this modality-specific encoder to like basically compress each of these data points into a smaller latent representation, and it pulls from this thing which is called a missing modality completion bank. And so this is used to basically form like a full, complete latent representation of the input data. And from here, this is passed. So I didn't really talk about how the model is trained, but basically, after they get this latent representation, they pass this as a feature vector to this prediction head that tries to predict what class did this input data come from. So there's 2 examples that they're doing here. They're predicting maybe like the stage of Alzheimer's, or another data set that they're using. They're predicting like patient mortality. We'll get more into that later. So what is this? How exactly are they kind of doing stuff with this special MLE? So if we look here in box C, the first step that they do is they train this all the experts on like the easiest samples in the data set. And this is called, they're calling this expert generalization. So this kind of gives all the experts like a good overview of all the different modalities and information.
All the experts simultaneously or independently, what like those easiest samples, are they coming from a subject that has all 4 modalities?
Yes.
Or okay, so it's are they easiest, or are they just all present? Like that's why they're easiest.
Yes.
Like what would the level of difficulty is it by the number of missing modalities or by like, oh, this one is a blurry image? Like,
I see what you're saying. We'll get more into that. But basically they consider cases where all four modalities are present as the easiest.
oh, okay.
But yeah, so they train all of the experts. So we'll get more into that as well, just kind of like an overview. And then we have, after they've been generalized, we go through this specialization step, which is where they train these experts to specialize in a particular modality combination. And they will get into how exactly they do that. And box B is just kind of explaining their missing modality bank. So obviously, like every data point is supposed to map to a latent representation. That latent representation encompasses the 4 or however many modalities that are present. But let's say there's a missing modality. They just have this lookup bank to find a latent representation for each modality that's missing, given a combination of the input data. So it's a little confusing, but we'll move on. Yes, so this is just the basic overview again of the model. So first, the data set is sorted based on how many modalities are present. So it's sorting in descending order, meaning at the very top are data points with the full modalities present. And then at the bottom are subjects with the least amount of modalities present. So during the generalization part, there could still be samples with missing modalities, but the key is to just sort them on the most full data points as possible. And so basically how it works is, so this model, it takes in the input and it encodes it to a smaller latent representation. Again, there's an encoder for each modality. And if that modality happens to be missing, they just pull one from that lookup table that I was telling you guys about. And the lookup table is updated based on how this model trains. So once they find a full representation, they pass this to the prediction head and just try to predict the class. And this is the missing modality bank. Again, we have the modality-specific encoders that take in each modality and encode it to a smaller dimensional space. And if a particular modality is missing, what they do is they use this lookup table to basically just pull a latent representation that's the same dimension as it's been encoded for the other modalities. So for example, let's say we have on the second row for patient number 2, we have image data, we have the biospecimen data present, and we have the genetic data present. But we don't have the clinical. So what we would need to do is use this lookup table and go to the top row, and then you can see this like C. And from there, we need to find the modality combination that we have observed. And from there, those are the values that we pull for this latent representation. Then from there, we have now the complete representation, and we pass this on to the prediction head. And so we'll get more into this as well, but this is the generalization step. So they trained this model on the easiest samples where the data set is sorted in descending order based on the modality availability. And so this model defines an expert for each modality combination. So for example, there's an expert for all of the modalities being present. There's an expert for maybe just clinical and image, etc. So next, after this input comes in, the gating function determines the top K experts for the given input, and only these experts are activated. So I don't think it uses top 1, right? I think it uses top K. And once this occurs, the selected experts process the input, and if the modality is missing, again, it's pulled from the missing modality bank. And from there, this latent representation is provided to a classifier as a feature, and this classifier attempts to predict which class this subject's data belong to. And now we have this expert specialization step. I think I have more information about this on the next few slides. But basically how this works is first they do the generalization step with this, with the like most full data possible to just kind of like generalize the experts. But then they introduce this S router, which uses a special loss function to update this, to update the experts to appropriately route to the correct modality combination. So as you can kind of see right here, this S router, it operates using a loss function that penalizes any kind of misrouting. So for example, we have the modality combination IBE. The goal is to always route to this expert after generalization. But let's say that doesn't happen. There's a bigger penalty using their S router loss function that would penalize something like that. But this is the goal.
This is strange because if you have a simple case statement, it would just work as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think they're trying to include a loss function to do training on the model to update.
You still update. I mean, AD works even if you have everything else branching. It's fine. You just take the branch that was actual. So something else in the sensor after.
Maybe. So this is kind of how the generalization works. So this is just kind of the basic setup for the sparse mixture of experts. So, but like a slight difference here is that again we're organizing the data set such that the easiest examples are trained on first, and so we train such that all the modalities have been observed, or at least that's the goal with the generalization step. And then after that, we're going to do the specialization, which is where the more challenging examples appear later. Oh, sorry. And then this second bullet point underneath that one is a little bit wrong, where it says input tokens only consist of full modality combinations. But and then so this is just the typical equations used for the sparse mixture of experts. So Y is the final output of the mixture of experts layer, and E is the number of experts. So we will sum up over all the outputs of the experts. And then, so F sub I of X is the output of the ith expert given an input X. And so then we also have this routing weight, which is associated with a given expert, depending on what its input is. And then we have this top K function, which basically says only activate the top K experts depending on what their outputs were. So yes.
Yeah, there's a case separation.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about his question. One of the things that could be like an interesting use of this is maybe you don't have like great clinical data. Maybe they didn't input or there's missing values in there. Technically, it's still there. They have like age inputted, but nothing else. Would a system like this be able to basically, I don't know exactly how, but make the assessment that an expert that has fewer modalities, but one of the modalities or the modality that's dropping has incomplete information, it would basically be able to select a different expert even though it has a certain amount of modalities. Is my question coming across? I guess, would the benefit of this be like saying, since it's not just selecting the top expert and it's selecting like a multitude of possible experts potentially, it could select an expert that is specialized to fewer modalities, but it's selecting that expert because even though you have a modality like clinical features present, there's missing data, or maybe it's not providing as much information as the other modalities.
Yeah, so what we're gonna see later is it's not necessarily the case that just because there's more modalities present that there's an overwhelming like additional information. So each combination has their own unique contribution of information that they provide. So that was kind of a cool assessment that they kind of did in this paper. So we'll kind of learn about that in the next slides. Yeah, any questions, anyone? Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. I'm kind of excited to see what happens when you pull apart one expert and see, yeah.
I'm kind of with Sergey that I don't get why you don't just use like branching statements, and rather than doing this whole like
I'm saving my philosophical comments to the end.
I can't wait. Wait to hear this tea.
Okay. Yes. So, and then here is the specialization step. So, yeah, they're going to use this S router to basically specialize the already kind of trained experts. So and again, this is going to be used on the data that doesn't necessarily have all of the complete modalities present. So what they want to do here is they want to target specific experts, which represent specific modalities. And they're achieving this by using this cross-entropy loss function. So here, the MC MC is a one-hot vector encoding, which is indicating which combination to target. So basically, we have vectors that represent each modality combination. And this is going to tell us exactly which expert we want to target. And then the S router, this is the output, and this is a probability distribution over the experts for an input X. So basically, which experts are most likely to best represent this input token. And so this loss, it just gets accumulated over all the inputs in the batch, as we can see it sums from 1 to n, where n is the number of inputs in the batch. And so effectively what this is doing is it's penalizing the S router when the selected experts don't match the modality combination. All right, so kind of just getting into what data they use and what kind of experiments they did. So they used 2 data sets. One of them is the ADNI data set, which is the Alzheimer's disease multimodal data set. And so the kind of data that we have here is MRI scans, PET scans, so those are both image data types. And we have the genetics, the clinical, and the bioscientific data. So the patients are across different stages of Alzheimer's. So here, what we're trying to do is classify the Alzheimer's stage. So they can be 1 of 3 stages: dementia, normal cognitive development, or mild cognitive impairment. And then we have this MIMIC IV data set, which is this data set about subjects who had to go to the emergency room, and maybe they had to go to like the ICU or something like that. And so what they were interested in here is assessing people who had more than 1 visit, and they wanted to know about, they wanted to classify if this subject unfortunately died within a year of their first visit. So it's a binary classification task of the mortality, the 1-year mortality of the subject. And again, I kind of explained this already, but we have this Alzheimer's disorder data set, and task is to just kind of do this 3-class classification of what stage of Alzheimer's disorder they're in. Then we have the MIMIC IV, where we're classifying the 1-year mortality. It's just yes or no classification. But they have different modalities present. So this MIMIC IV has these ICD-9 codes, clinical text, labs, and vitals. But then ADNI has, of course, the imaging data and everything we already discussed. So they selected a few different baselines to test their model against. So some other popular like MLBBQ models and various different deep learning models that take in this multimodal data. Some of them only take in like single modality. So we'll discuss that next. So as you can see on the board, these are some of the baselines. These are the baselines that they use. Some of them only take images, and other ones are only taking certain types of data, like genetic data and stuff like that. And then so the last few entries in this table are probably the best comparison for this model, as they're taking in multimodal data, but they really, really struggle when not all of the modalities are present. So they're kind of expecting everything to be there. So this is some of their settings. So they used the best hyperparameter settings that were provided in the original baseline papers. But if they weren't available, they just did their hyperparameter tuning based on these first three entries in the table. And here they chose these settings for the number of experts that they specified, and as well as the top K. So, and you can just kind of see the other settings that they chose. So to share the same inference space where single and modality and multimodal baselines should both be able to predict, they chose the intersection as the test and validation set. So this means that during the training phase, the data set could be incomplete. So for the multimodal baselines, if they had the ability to impute or interact with other modalities, they leveraged their methods. Otherwise, they used a zero padding to facilitate batch by string. So these are some of the results that they found. So this is for the ADNI data set where they did the 3-class classification of the Alzheimer's disorder stage. And they found that their model obviously performed very well. And they can kind of see that their model accuracy was increasing as more modalities became available. So Flex-MoE was one of their, I think Fuse-MoE was one of those baselines that they were comparing to that said that they were capable of handling multimodal data. But as you can kind of see, as certain modalities were missing, it kind of struggled with the accuracy in those cases. And they made a comment about these two models, the 59 and 33, that basically these models had too much reliance on full modality availability, failing to make use of partially available modality combinations. So they kind of just basically found, especially with their top competitors, that there was a lack of consideration for the modality combinations, even though they do process multimodal data. That kind of resulted in this kind of bottleneck phenomenon where they kind of had slips in accuracy. Okay, and these are the results with this binary classification task on 1-year mortality with the Mimic IV data set. And as we can see, Flex-MoE is performing very well. So again, they found with increasing modalities provided to the model that they had a pretty large gap in performance compared to the top baselines that they compared to. So this is some of the other things that they explored in terms of like what this model is actually doing. So this is like some kind of a validation that they did of their missing modality bank. So they wanted to look at whether it captures the relevant information observed in each modality combination, kind of focusing on the consistency of how the model handles the information, the missing information.
Before you go, a little more detail. So in the figure on the bottom, BG, right? CB, BG, and C. The BG is some kind of a random subject for which modalities I, B, and G, or is it IBG or BG or whatever? Yeah, the 3 available modalities have values that are not necessarily similar to the ones that you get with the new subject, right? It's just like, oh, I have somebody with 2 modalities, and then like, it feels to me like grabbing random representation C instead of if you were just doing some kind of interpolation in this embedding space and just took centroids of C. I don't know what they're doing, but from what you're saying, it feels like they're taking an exact value from another subject and implanting here, regardless of whether that subject in other respects similar to the subject in question.
So I think there's some kind of shared like shared information. There's like a shared latent space between the modality combinations. So that's what they're trying to learn, I feel, with this missing modality.
Yeah. Okay. I just don't understand the value of or the function of the bank. Is it exact database, like just grab from what's already there, or in like fill in the geometry? which wouldn't be called modality bank, then it's just a space from which you sample.
So I think it is, I guess it is more of a geometry. So from my understanding, they randomly initialize this bank, but then, and they pull from it when a certain modality is missing, given the input combination. But they update the values in this modality bank using the loss function of the model. So it results in like this latent space of all modality combinations. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. I mean, those modalities are implicitly forming latent space anyways, so yeah. Okay, confused. It's like okay, it worked, but because some of the decisions feel like we're adding parameters, and that will increase the power of the system, and then it's very hard to distinguish whether they're improving because they added more parameters, regardless of which way, or because it's an engineering feature the way they describe it.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit of gray area.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, just like I wanted to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, so and we'll kind of get into that. They do some like ablation tests and stuff. I feel that maybe kind of answer those questions, but yeah, I agree with you on that. So on the left, we have the cosine similarity between the observed modalities and their bank representation. So what I think that they're doing here is, so obviously there is like a true representation of each modality combination, and we get that from observed data. But then there's also the bank representation that's in this missing modality bank that's learned. So what they did was they just basically computed the difference between the observed combinations and the modality bank entries. So they wanted to kind of talk about these things that I have highlighted with the arrows. So on the right, they compare the observed modality combinations with their representation in the modality bank. With more overlapping modality combinations, they find that their bank tends to share more similar embedding information. So they're saying that we can see in the left plot where the full modality scenario, which is ICVG, so how this works is just go to the column, that's the observed, has higher similarity with the ICB and CVG. So the green arrows, they have a higher similarity score rather than just the blue arrows on the red plot. And they're saying this is, for one, because there's more modalities present. And so they're just basically saying with more modalities present, there's more overlapping and similar embedding information. And on the left, they're looking at this one-on-one comparisons between modalities, comparing the feature retrieved from the bank when one modality is missing. And so their findings suggest that their model handles certain modality combinations differently depending on which information they share. So as you can see with these green arrows, when G is missing, it shares more information with C and B features rather than the blue arrow, which is information it shares with the I feature modality. So they're claiming that the way that they have their model set up is that certain missing modalities are handled more similarly by the model than others. So they're saying there's like some kind of information in this shared latent space between the modality combination. So that's what they're pointing to for that claim. And then another kind of thing that they looked at were these activation ratios for the different experts. So they found that, so this is kind of showing the generalized knowledge. You can kind of see that with the full feature set, that generalized knowledge was kind of passed through all of the experts in this example. But then if you look at the kind of each expert obviously has more than just the full modality spectrum. They also have additional information that they learned. They're claiming through specialization. So for example, you can see in the BGC expert, which is this one, the two most activated input tokens are the full modality token, which is the green looking one, and its own combination, which is this blue right here. And then they did this ablation test where they removed some of the like key features of their model. So they removed the expert specialization and generalization. And they noticed that the accuracy dropped the lowest when they did this test. Another test that they did was they removed the embedding bank, which also caused the accuracy to drop significantly. And they also changed the order of the sorting to ascending order. So where they did the generalization task on the modalities, and they found again that the accuracy dropped again. So they're kind of just through these tests, just kind of validating the significance and importance of the different features that they had in it. And they also did the sensitivity analysis. They looked at the hyperparameters for the number of experts, the number of these layers, and also the top K choice. So the number of experts, obviously more is always better. So they found that the lowest number of experts did the best. In this case, they chose 16. So that kind of makes sense. And then they also found with the number of sparse mixture of expert layers they chose, using the single layer of sparse mixture of experts was the most effective. So maybe just obviously due to like just increased complexity in their model. And then they found 4 to be the best choice for their top K. Routing as well. So yeah, and they feel that this is because manually assigning the top 1 expert index to the target modality combination leaves more room for better harmonization with the sparse mixture of experts design. But yeah, so that concludes my presentation. So if anybody has any questions, feel free.
Yeah. Well,
It's the looks for the router.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah, so do you have any questions about this specifically?
I just wonder how it works.
Oh, okay. So from what I understand, after they do the initial training, on like the most full data, then they start this specialization task, which, in which they provide this MC, which is a one hot vector, indicating which combination to target. So like if we have an input data X, they might not have all of the modalities present, or maybe they do, but they want to target that specific combination that's present in that data type. So that's when they use this MC function that gets that one hot encoding. And so then they have this S router, which outputs this probability distribution over the experts for the input X. So basically, which experts are most likely to be the best fit for this input data point. And so I guess they take the max of those. Maybe they take the top 1. Yeah, okay. I think they take the top 1 from that, those probabilities. And so they just take the logarithm of that and multiply it with this one hot encoding in order to target this specific router or expert, sorry. So they do this for all the inputs in the batch, and then they just sum it up for the cross entropy loss.
But it looks like they try to teach this holder to always choose the expert which is dealing with this exact combination of modalities.
Yes.
But it's difficult to mark. You can time this like
Oh, yeah, it's
That's
forgive
what
that.
Sergey was saying.
Yeah, I just,
Yeah, it's. I also don't see the point. Like, why not? Like, just have modality-specific encoders from the get-go, and you maybe have a few ways of routing their combinations, but you don't need to learn how to do that if you have like pre-existing modalities, right? It's different. Like maybe if you had a weird multimodal data set where you want to discover modalities are different. Like it makes sense like for image recognition, right? Where they're like recognizing different feature types with different experts is the intuition. Whether or not they're actually doing that arguable. But yeah, when you have like T1, T2, flare, it's like why not just make an expert for each and maybe some ways of combining that, but I don't see the point in learning it.
on the other hand, I guess you don't always have an expert for each possible combination.
Yeah, not necessarily.
But I'm not sure how they teach it. It's the right test.
So they're not, so. Well, I mean, this is a function just used to target a specific expert. Or maybe it's kind of more like a fine tuning of the experts in a way because they've already been trained. So this cross entropy loss is used to just update the weights in each expert that's been selected as being most fit for this modality combination.
I have a comment. I think you did. I really appreciate how you explain everything. That helps. I think your explanations were really succinct and really informative.
Yeah, we all need to learn from
Yeah,
Joanne.
I know.
Yeah.
I was just thinking like
I thought
I was just thinking I should do a jargon slide. You know, where you just explain jargon like that. I'm like that's a good idea.
Oh, that's a good idea.
yeah, I also have a comment. Okay, that's what I have. I don't have a question. I don't know. Yeah, but what was your name?
Harry.
Harry. Yeah. The question that you asked is actually very legit because then I have three kind of pronged comment. One thing is okay. Well, haven't we started with neural networks, fully connected MLPs, as mixture of experts already, or ensemble of networks? That's why I drop out and everything. It's already an ensemble. Like it's a tiny, small networks, and they're supposed to switch and route depending on the stuff, but very hard to train. And although we advocate and sort of um, um, encourage moving in the direction of end-to-end learning, and the network will learn by itself, but still, inductive bias is like what we're doing here. Like, oh yeah, we discovered this transformer that has the best inductive bias to all possible inductive biases. But then we're again, oh, we're building this. But the bitter lesson tells us, no, by the like soon we will get to the time when NLP can learn all of that. Maybe, right? Uh, because NLP is a mixture through ensemble, right? Ensemble network and could learn. And so some of this building and like the authors, it's not to criticize the authors at all, but it's the entire IEEE kind of the engineering. Oh, it's Lord, that's why I criticize. No, just kidding. It's like there is a tendency of complexity. It's like, oh, let's build stuff. And because we build stuff, it feels like we're contributing, right? But like, I don't know. On the other hand, the third part. So the bitter lesson. Rich Sutton wrote a one pager. Whoever, if you didn't read it. It's very short, and why it's bitter for a reason, because yes, we do want to build smart widgets and Swiss clocks of the 17th century and stuff like that. That's part of our us being engineers and sciences, but because we think they're elegant. But the bitter lesson tells us more computation, more data will win whatever the smart method you can offer right now. In the future, when you will have, at least that's what the past shows. But yeah, he's forgetting the S curve. Yeah, so far the past shows this, but the brain, our brain, because it's limited by lots of evolutionary pressures, including how will you give birth to a baby, and all of that stuff. And in our brain, so there is this neurosurgeon, Elkanon Goldberg. He wrote several books, and he has this idea from looking at the resections and histologies and everything, that our brain is organized as a mixture of expert in a sense, because he thinks one hemisphere, and I don't know which one, is more of a small world network, like lots of hubs and fully densely connected components, and loosely connected among them. Another one is one single mesh densely connected component. This is the router, this is the manager, sort of decides what is this more appropriate to, and then the specialist gets summoned. And when you grow up as a child, as a baby, if a new specialist is needed, it's either added or preserved, depending on your theory of the pruning in the childhood and stuff. So if we have limitations in parameters or space or energy, maybe then the bitter lesson doesn't work, right? But if you can keep adding, fusion and fission reactors and keep building the data centers, then maybe you're fine. Just like but but again, I'm computer scientist, so we know that even if we turn every atom in the universe into a transistor and make it the universe like a full computerium, it's not going to solve some of the problems efficiently. Still, even then, so I don't know. So yeah, but I think there is room for exercises like that, building Swiss called devices, but yeah. Yeah, we have to be aware of what's like. I'd like to simplify stuff.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like doing a lot. But I think it's kind of a hot topic now, kind of like the multimodal sparse learning stuff. I'm interested in it, so yeah, it was kind of cool to explain.
Yes. No, thank you. It's just like, thank you.
But you'd like those, like, I really appreciate that. So.
Yeah, thanks, Joanne.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks people online for listening.